Hello, everybody. I want to welcome a very special speaker for this session, Chandra Clarke. Chandra, thank you so much for joining us in the Post-Pandemic Pivot Summit. There is so much we can cover about you and your work, and I want to use every single second we have available with you today. But before we jump in, let me just make a little brief introduction about the amazing life that you live. So if you guys are not familiar with Chandra Clarke, she's a TEDx speaker, a citizen science advocate, and an award-winning entrepreneur. Her company and herself have received a multitude of awards, among them Best Overall Company, Most Innovative Company, and a multitude of awards for Best Women Entrepreneur. If that wasn't enough, Chandra has also published a multitude of incredible books and received multiple awards for her work as a writer. You are a well-known and award-winning author. And the latest jewel that has been added to your portfolio, it's a book that we are here to speak about today. And the book is called The Entrepreneurial Parent. Now listen to this title if you're not familiar with her book. Run your business, raise your family, and keep your sanity. So Chandra, just in the title alone, you had us because you described exactly the dream that most of us have when we start a business and the goal that we are pursuing. So thank you for making time for being with us today. And I wonder if you wanted to add a little bit to your about you, since I just mentioned a few things, but there's so much to talk about your incredible life.
Well, thank you. Gosh, you really know how to make a person blush first thing in the morning. The company that my partner, Terry Johnson, and I founded and ran is called Scribendi.com. It's an editing and proofreading firm that services clients all over the world. It's still a going concern. My partner and I sold it in 2017. So we've been through the whole startup right through to successful exit phase. And my parental qualifications are the fact that we have 4 kids and 2 dogs. So our house often looks like a cross between a Toys R Us and a Pet Value and a tornado, basically. So we know what it's like. We've been in the trenches. To a certain extent, we still are. And we look forward to helping more people reach the dream and not go bananas in the process.
So it's actually great. You kind of like hinted to the why behind your book. I think that it's unusual that somebody has taken the time to kind of like remember once you reach a certain level of success, most people tend to forget what it feels like to be in a startup mode. So it's great that you actually do remember and mention that you kind of like in some ways still within the mix. Is that the reason you decided to write the book now?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the books that you see out there for business advice, they're very good, but they tend to be aimed at a very specific subset of entrepreneur, the young guy, either just out of college or maybe even dropped out of college, who's got all the time in the world, maybe some VC money, maybe some cash from parents or whatever, and no dependents. I mean, no outside obligations. And that's great. And that's an absolutely valid way to start business and everything else like that. But we wanted, everywhere we went for conferences, we were meeting people like ourselves, people who had children, people who were struggling with elder care issues, who were struggling with all of those other issues. And there was nothing out there for them. Like, how do you do this and maintain some sort of sanity while you do it? So that's one of the reasons why we wrote the book is we wanted to provide that advice. We'd been through the whole thing. And we also wanted to help people, disconnect from the treadmill that is a corporate life or a job outside, the standard stuff, and be able to reach their dreams and be independent and go their own path, because we found it really useful to be able to do that. And it had its own constraints, but it's a lot more freedom than a standard 9-to-5 job.
So that's an interesting segue because, we are having this conversation for people who hear about this in the future. But for now, we are still navigating this worldwide pandemic. And as a result of this pandemic, many of us have the opportunity to reevaluate what life, what is important for us in life. And that meant that many of us jumped into entrepreneurship and left, or, corporate jobs or whatever it is that we were doing prior to that. And we did it exactly for the reasons that you're saying. We want to have the flexibility to raise our children, to be there for our elderly parents or whatever life we live in. But, one of the challenges when we were in our 9 to 5 job, we always felt pressure about where is the work-life balance. But that has not disappeared as an entrepreneur. And you mentioned in your book that might be a myth, that the pursuit of that work-life balance. Could you tell us a little bit about how does that work in your end, and just a little bit of what you cover in the book about this pursuit of life-work balance?
Absolutely. We always talk about work-life balance, but nobody actually says what that's supposed to look like. So, and particularly for women, we get this image that it's supposed to be gliding effortlessly through our day with all of the pre-made meals that we had time for on the weekend ready to go, and children going out the door, yeah, bye mom, bye dad, and no screaming fits, and no, nobody's life is like that. I mean, never mind what you see on social media, because those are carefully curated special moments in time, frozen in time. You don't get to see the shouting that happened ahead of time, or whatever chaos, the dog barfing on the carpet just as everything was supposed to, those are carefully curated moments, and nobody's life really looks like that. But we get this image that work-life balance is supposed to be that way. And so then we feel like we're failing if things are stressful or chaotic. And that's a big disservice to both parents. So what you need to try and do is work for averages. So if your mornings are, chaotic because you got to get kids out the door to school, or, pandemic times you were having to homeschool or whatever, then you work on other areas of life that you have a bit more control. And if you have ridiculous mornings, then you try and have chill evenings. Or if you have really, really intense, weekdays, as a lot of us do, then you try and aim for a more chill weekend. So it's about averages rather than every day being perfect. And there are going to be, sometimes even years in your life. I know with my own elder care issues, we had a lot of stress over a period of 2 or 3 years as we were trying to get my parents, safely looked after and so forth. And then, after that, things were much more relaxed. So you have ups and downs, but the idea is to take the big picture and look at it, and try and look at averages rather than trying to make every day perfect and then fail at that.
That sounds, it's interesting to hear you say that, because it automatically kind of like lifts a weight off our shoulders, right? Just by actually saying that's the life that we all live. And it kind of like sounds like under the same umbrella, we can explore, those feelings of guilt, of always trying to make a choice between, are we doing enough for our business? Are we doing enough for our family? So would you hold them under the same umbrella of like trying to find an average, or how have you dealt with that pressure of, are we doing enough?
We learned early on that the times when we felt most stressed and most guilty was when we were trying to do both things at once. When we were trying to write an email back to an important client while also looking after the kids at the playground, or when the kids would come charging into the home office, and mom, dad, when you're trying to have an important meeting or whatever. I mean, more of us than ever have experienced this recently, because we're all on Zooms, and it's almost impossible to keep the kids or the cat or the dog or whatever from wandering through at inopportune moments. So those were the times where we felt most stressed. So we realized that what we tried to do as much as possible is compartmentalize those aspects of our lives, so that if we were taking the kids to the playground, the phone stayed in the pocket and was turned off, and we just chilled with the kids. And that way the kids felt like they could run over to us and show us whatever pretty rock they'd found, or, hey mom, look at me as I slide down. And the kids felt like they were being paid attention to, because they were. And we weren't trying to cram work things into every corner of our life. And then when it came time to tell the kids, no, actually, this office, you can't go in here, you can't swipe my pens and pencils. When I have a meeting, you need to be quiet, because the kids were getting that attention the rest of the time, they were more likely to respect those boundaries. And then everybody got along a lot better. So trying to be present and not try and multitask, that was our biggest win.
It sounds like you and Terrace also developed pretty strong communication among the two of you about
Absolutely.
your context. It makes me think a little bit about obviously the importance of that, because in many families, it may be that one parent decided to stay on a full-time job while the other one tries to get the business up and running until they get, they reach a point where they could actually run it together. Were you always, both of you, entrepreneurs at the same time, or did you ever had a time where one was a corporate person and the other one was an entrepreneur?
We did have a very interesting time at the beginning because my husband was an immigrant from the UK to Canada. So technically speaking, he couldn't work outside the house, and he really couldn't work technically within the business either. So it was me holding the bag for as long as it took for him to get his permanent residency. So that was a tricky time. And we learned early on that communicating with each other and trying to say, okay, this is why I'm doing it, and this is what's happening, and this is how I think we should run this, and actually articulating as much as possible. You can't over communicate. Doing that as often as possible and as frequently as possible just made a lot of things go much more smoothly. And it's the same with kids. Kids are smarter than you think, they're more aware than you think, and they're more observant than you think. They will pick up on stress, they will pick up on moods. But if you talk to them and explain what's happening in an age-appropriate way and say, hey, look, mom and dad had a really rotten morning because X, Y, and Z went wrong. Can you cut us some slack today? And hey, maybe we'll go watch a movie or whatever. It doesn't always work. Kids aren't always rational either. But the more you talk to them, then the easier it becomes to say, hey, you know what? Everything went great today. Why don't we get and go have a coffee someplace, or, an ice cream or whatever. They get used to that. They also get used to seeing how you handle stress and how you cope, and they don't get stuck on schedules, and they don't fall apart when things go sideways, because things are going to go sideways and everybody's going to find a way to cope that helps everybody move through it.
That's
so that communication with both your partner, with your children, with friends and family, it's absolutely critical to making it all go as smoothly as is humanly possible.
I mean, you're bringing also a very important point, right? Because when we work outside of the house, and your family is not part of it in the way that an entrepreneurial life is, you may be missing the opportunity to showcase to your children how to develop those coping skills, and also their discovery period of, what they're good at, or, to learn that they could make a life for themselves doing whatever it is that they want to do. So that's an added benefit,
yes,
that one could leverage to this experience.
Absolutely. Because you want to show children that there's more than one path. Too many times we see, kids marching lockstep. They go through high school, they go through college, they pick a career, they go into corporate. And, I think this is why a lot of midlife crises happen, because, they get into these locksteps, and then all of a sudden at age 40 or 50, they're like, whoa, hang on, I'm suddenly this age, and did I get a chance to try the things I wanted to try, or whatever. So being an entrepreneurial parent actually models a different path and shows them that, okay, that's cool. I could do that if I wanted to. And depending on how successful you are as an entrepreneurial parent as well, it might show them, what, I would really prefer the security of, a standard 9-to-5 job, or maybe an academia or some other thing. But it does show them options, that there's more than one way to do the things you want to do.
That's actually a really great leeway to, in your book, you walk us through 5 stages of a business. And I think that, as you describe, not everybody's going to be successful as an entrepreneur, but sometimes you're not successful because you don't know enough about what to expect in a business.
Yeah.
And that is a piece in your book that I highly appreciated, because it's so crystal clear. So I wonder if you could just walk us through the stages as you describe, to raise some awareness for people that might be listening and wondering,
Right.
How do they get unstuck?
So the business press and the mainstream press tends to focus a lot on the startup phase because that's when everything's new and everything's so uncertain. It's to a certain extent the hardest part of the business because you're learning the ropes. Money's tight. You're probably doing it without very many employees or outside help. If you're doing it as a parent, the kids are young. You might also be having other issues like special needs kids or elder care. So it's the toughest, most stressful part of the whole thing. And we get a lot of attention on that, and rightly so. I mean, many businesses fold within the first year, a lot more fold within the first 5 years because it's the toughest place. But beyond that, there's after that what we call the grind stage, where you've survived, but you're only keeping your head above water, and you're sort of beating yourself up because it's like, okay, I managed to get this far. Why isn't everything working? Why is this still so hard? Why does it feel like I'm still slaving my guts out here and not getting anywhere? And that you have to realize that that's a normal part of it because you've survived, but you haven't put in the processes to actually start making things go more smoothly and happen more the way you want to. And you probably also haven't gotten the staff or taken a few more risks that way. After that is the plateau. And that is where you're not grinding so hard and you've got things running a little bit more smoothly, but you sort of hit this stage where you're comfortable, but you're not seeing the growth that everybody thinks is supposed to happen. You might be wondering, okay, what's the silver bullet? What's going to take me to the next stage? When can I start thinking that this is successful? When can I start thinking, oh gosh, I could sell this? Or, is this something I want to pass down to my kids? You're successful, but you're not 100% through all the barriers. If you manage to, with some of the things we say in the book to get past the plateau stage, and for a lot of people, I should point out too, the plateau is a perfectly valid place to just sit at as well. I mean, if things are ticking along and you're making enough money to be happy and pay the bills, it's a perfectly valid place to sit. After that comes the happy hill, where you have managed to unpick the knots and the bottlenecks that were keeping you, at an even keel. And your curve is actually starting to go like this. You're making more revenue. New opportunities are happening. People are starting to call you instead of you having to hustle so hard all the time. It's a brilliant place to be. And that's the time you need to start thinking about, okay, do I want to keep going? Do I want to hit another plateau? Do I want to start, thinking about the next stage, which is the exit? And this is a part of business life that not many people think about very much at all, and they really need to, because there is an end game. You can either end badly in that you get sideswiped by, a pandemic or, recession or some other thing, or you step out voluntarily and you either hand it off to employees or you hand it off to your family, or you decide to sell. And unless you've done all the steps prior to that to make those things viable options, it's going to be really difficult for you to get out. And you also want to be able to choose when you get out, so that you want to be able to choose to get out before a recession hits if you can, or before a technology comes along and wipes out what you've done or whatever. You want to be able to get on your own terms. So by looking at all of these phases and having an idea of what's likely to happen within your business in terms of the grand overall arc of things, it's very important, because then it gives you a way to plan and figure out how to do it, and how to do it on your own terms, and do it in a way that's going to benefit you and your family. So that knowing that path is critical to being able to plan for it.
That's actually very helpful, because also, as entrepreneurs, you're never at a loss of ideas,
Yes.
and you're never at a loss of desires.
Yeah.
And I also think that as you describe the stages, what is embedded in that is that you're growing as a leader, you're growing as an entrepreneur, and chances are you start thinking about like, oh, this is great, but I could do X, Y, and Z. So
Yes.
having that vision, having that plan allows you to seed, if you will, your readiness for the next stage.
Absolutely.
As we speak to many entrepreneurs, many of them have mentioned exactly what you're saying about, they haven't not gone as deep as detailing the plan that you're outlining for all of us today. But they often speak about the maturity of an entrepreneur and
Mhm.
how you are often start with something. In your case, a huge company, a very profitable company, but then you evolve into your next love, if you will, which is probably where you are now, cultivating and growing your next little baby that is no longer a baby, is doing actually
Yeah.
quite well. Uh, so that sounds phenomenal, especially it's so refreshing to hear you say that, because often we don't think about it. We're stuck, as you described, in the startup, or we're stuck we're just in the grind, and that's where we are. But it's so important to get your guidance about thinking about long term. So as we come to the end of our precious time with you today, I have just two more questions for you. The first one is, what are three things that an entrepreneur that is listening to you today could do today while they wait for your book coming from Amazon, to start implementing some strategies that will get them into a pathway of long-term thinking and long-term success?
It's absolutely perfect that you picked three things, because one of the biggest productivity hacks and best mindset hacks that we know of is the 3-item to-do list. And I'll tell you how that works. We dump all of our ideas and all of our to-dos on one main list. We use an app called Todoist to track all of the things. But then on a daily basis, what we do is we draw down 3 items from that list, and only 3 items. And the reason why we only pick 3 is because 3 is achievable. You could write down 10 things on your to-do list and get 8 of them crossed off. But for whatever reason, because the human brain is weird, that still feels like failure, even though you hit 80% of it, because you didn't cross everything off.
Mm-hmm.
3 is achievable. 3 is doable. And if you cross off that, you've succeeded for the day, and anything else you accomplish out of that is a bonus. So you feel like you win all the time with that. More importantly, it helps you prioritize the 3 things that are most important to get done, to unlock a bottleneck, to get a supplier moving on something, to get the next stage done, to get the next hire done. It forces you to prioritize, and it stops the overwhelm, because when you see the huge to-do lists, then you start to get paralyzed, because you think, oh my gosh, I just have so much to do. And then Facebook calls or Twitter calls, and there's so many other interesting things, and then the procrastination sits in. And so the 3 things, that's doable, it's achievable. It helps you manage the overwhelm, and it helps you to prioritize. It's a huge productivity hack, one of the best ones we've ever found.
That's fantastic. So right below this video, there's a link for your book for those that have not ordered it yet. So people will be eager to get the book after speaking with you. But what are other ways in which we can stay connected with you or learn more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also on Twitter, at Chandra Clarke, all one word. And I'm also, I have a personal website where I talk a little bit more about my fiction and nonfiction writing outside the business world. So that's chandraclarke.com, spelled with a CH at the beginning. And I'm sure you'll see that in the links and everything else that get put up. So that's where you can reach me. And I'm always happy to talk to other entrepreneurs and offer more advice and one-on-one talks. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We are so delighted to have you as part of the Post-Pandemic Pivot Summit. This has been so refreshing to hear. And we can't wait for all of us whoever hasn't got the book to get it and put all this great advice into action. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.